So as Frank mentioned, this talk is about how we can build large single node memory expansion using CXL without breaking the budget. First, I'd like to talk about the motivation. Why do we need to scale up these large memory servers? I think Ron probably touched a little bit that in his previous talk on the AI use case. But even beyond AI, we see a lot of HPC, generalized high performance computing, and database use cases for scaling up a server. There's three primary reasons. If I were to break it up, one is to enable the processing of ever larger data set. We see it in AI, we see it in genomics, we see it in computational fluid dynamics, EDA, and all type of simulations in general. Number two is kind of like a faster time to result. And then this is comparing the scale up approach versus a scale out approach, where you try to shard one large problem so that it can be processed in a distributed fashion. But if there's opportunity to kind of bring it back into a larger server, we actually see a faster time to result. And then like the third one is this higher performance to the cost ratio that goes back to something Frank mentioned earlier. How do we bring down the cost down here? So I have two examples. One example is a workload from genomic space called MetaBat. It does a lot of genomic analysis of a large set of data. We're comparing here like the two running environment. One is this scale out approach with a cluster of 100 nodes. Each node is about 64 gigabyte instance. And it took about 2 weeks to finish one run or one analysis. And then just because there's so much coordination between these nodes, there is a high probability of failure for this run. Now, we were able to do this on a single 4 terabyte node. And then that kind of reduced the runtime significantly from 2 weeks to 4 days. Still long, but much sooner than the 2 weeks, and then it's a significantly lower chance of failure as well. The second example I have here, again, is it's toward like this performance cost ratio here, and then this is for our analytics workload based off a SQL Server. And the baseline here is that we have one single 64 gigabyte server with this, that's a baseline queries per second QPS. And then if we were to support higher queries per second, there's two ways you can do it. You can scale out, just doubling the server. But then what you have here is that you will run into the additional server cost, as well as software license associated with this additional server. And usually that's just as much as a hardware cost, if not more. And then the other approach that we took is that we scaled up this individual server by expanding the memory using CXL. We were able to get a similar result, 2x the queries per second metric, and with the only cost being the memory expansion module. And I'll go into a little bit later about that. So that's kind of the motivation of why we want to scale the server. Now there's challenges, of course. When you look at server in general, there's CPU core count, GPU now as well. And then the other big side of this is memory. So our talk is more focused on the memory side. And in terms of the memory scale challenges, it's number one is that there's a limited set of DIMM slots on the motherboard. So it's usually fixed as well. So there's only so many DIMM slots that you can plug in. Number two is that like the DIMM slots themselves, they have certain capacity and bandwidth characteristic. And in general, you have to follow certain patterns when you populate these DIMM slots. So there's only a few ways that you can expand your memory. And then third is the actual cost, especially if you get up to the high density DIMM slots, like the 128 gigabyte DIMM slots. The cost of these DIMM slots these DIMM modules, they go up significantly. The per unit cost goes up, per gigabyte cost goes up, more than 3 times. So that's why it's not that easy to scale up a server, especially on the memory side. What we're presenting here, and then the rest of the slide will follow through, is how we can do it. One way we can do it using CXL expansion hardware and Memory Machine X software. That's our product to enable this scaling up of a memory on the server within budget and without impacting the application performance. So so that's a flow of this. So let me go into this. Sorry, I just see a question here. Okay, I actually saw the question from Louis about this about the math of expansion. I actually have a slide to go into it, so I'll come back to this. So there's for CXL just a brief refresher. I think it was some of our previous friends has gone through that before from I think Smart Modular, but in general. What you see originally is that you have these DDR DIMM slots, right? That's attached to the motherboard, attached to each of these CPU socket. That's traditionally the only available way for memory. With CXL technology, there's 2 more methods to expand memory now. One of them is using these E3.S modules. They're easier because they're front loading, so you can swap in and swap out just like you do with a hard drive. Without opening up the box. However, they have usually they have a fixed capacity. So we have seen 64 gigabyte, 112, 256, and then I think there's an announced product with a 512 gigabyte as well. And the memory bandwidth is usually at 8 PCIe lanes here. So the other option is something you can plug into the back with these the PCIe add-in card, the AICs. Now they have these are PCIe card with a CXL controller and their own DIMM slots. So it's more flexible in the sense that you can populate it with different DIMM configurations. They're in generally higher capacity. You can go up to 2 terabyte per card. And in terms of memory bandwidth, they can go up to 16 by 16 PCIe lanes, which is functionally equivalent to about 1 DDR5 channel for these socket or motherboard based DIMMs. So these are the different configurations. Because we're talking about a large, extra large capacity server, I'll focus on the AIC card. So this is literally like the money slide here out of this deck. What I'm trying to compare here is different configurations. You have a baseline configuration of all the DRAMs on the motherboard, compare with the other configurations that has a CXL expansion. These three columns is just kind of the total system memory spec, right? You have the capacity, the total size, the total cost, and then the per gigabyte cost. These columns here are the memory, the DIMM modules on the motherboard, what density we're using, how many, and then like the subtotal and cost. And here is the AIC CXL AIC card with the type of expansion, capacity, and the cost. So that's a general format of the table, but I like to just call out a few comparisons here. Now I'm assuming this is using Intel. I have the figures for AMD as well. So if you're interested, feel free to reach out to me. I have my email at the end of the presentation. So let's first look at if you are to build a 4 terabyte server here. The only way to do it by using everything on the motherboard, all the memory on the motherboard, is using these 128 gigabyte DIMM modules. There's 32 slots on there for dual socket server, and then this is the cost, right? It's about $46,000 with $11 per gigabyte. With CXL, there are several ways we can do it. We can move it back from on the motherboard itself. We can reduce the density from 128 to the 64 gigabyte DIMMs. That significantly reduces the cost there. And then we make up for the capacity by using CXL expansion card. So here I'm using like these expansion card with 8 DIMMs each. I think our friends at Smart Modular have a product with this kind of configuration. And you can see here with 4 of these cards, we can bring back the total capacity to 4 terabyte, but at less than half of the memory cost than our previous motherboard or socket only DRAM configuration. You can even further optimize that by using DDR4 at the expansion. Oh, by the way, I should mention that I'm assuming all the motherboard, all these DIMMs are using DDR5. But on the expansion slot, you have the option of using DDR4. And in this case, if we use DDR4, 128 gigabyte DIMM modules, we only need 2 AIC cards, and we can even reduce the memory cost even further, both the per gigabyte cost and the total cost. So that's one configuration. The other configuration here, so this is for 4 terabyte. I also run a little comparison for 8 terabyte. For 8 terabyte, if you have sorry, I saw there was a new question that popped up. So for 8 terabyte, if you were to again use a socket memory only, you essentially have to go for like a 4 CPU quad server kind of configuration, and then this is each one of these memory slot populated with 128 gigabyte module, and then this is just a purely the memory cost for 8 terabyte. But in addition to that, because you are using more custom quad CPU system, the CPU system becomes the entire system becomes more expensive, and I have some example of that. Alternatively, again, using the CXL expansion, what we can do is we can bring back to a dual socket server using these 64 DIMM modules and making up the capacity using AIC expansion card. And this is what you get. You have a lower cost dual CPU system and a lower cost memory as well. So about half of the memory cost. And I ran a few more configurations here to just to show like if you want to go out, build 11 terabyte system using dual core dual socket CPU and CXL expansion. This is what it'll look like in terms of memory cost. And then if you want to go all the way out, you could essentially build 32 terabyte single machine. This is what previously would have been a supercomputer kind of a range. You can do that. It's going to be more costly, but if you have a high value application for it, then this is something that's possible now. So sorry, I just saw another question. There's a huge cliff between 96 gigabyte and 128 gigabyte DIMM cost. How much of CXL variability is based on this difference? Presumably the cost difference will drop over time. So you're absolutely right. I think that CXL introduces a few more flexibilities. One of them is based on this per gigabyte cost from the different density. The other one is from the different range, DDR5 to DDR4. So like both of these could play a role. And then in addition, I think it's also the flexibility using a dual socket system, quad socket system. And as well as if you wanted to hit certain size, right? Like normally when you populate these DIMMs, you want to keep them in a certain, all the DIMM modules have to be the same size. So when you go, especially go up to bigger memory machines, like it's like a step, one jump to the next hop. And then with CXL, it gives you more flexibility on what kind of total memory you want to configure. And I think there's a question from Louis before is if you have a 64 gigabyte DIMM, assuming each CPU support 12 channels, we could get up to 4 terabyte in a cluster of 5. Wonder about the math of 164 gigabyte nodes. Can you expand on that? So I think like I could do I think for Louis I could probably reach out to you and then we can have a huddle on the math of the 164 gigabyte nodes. In the example I had cited, they were actually using AWS for this. So we can even look at not just the capex cost, but we can also look at this from an OpEx kind of perspective. So any other questions? I hope I answered those two questions. Okay, great. Okay, so moving on. So the next, I wanted to show just some of the servers that would be able to support this. So these are actual models from Supermicro. You can look at this 2U unit that has a dual AMD CPU. And if you look at the back, you could actually fit 4 of these AIC card in there, even though there's 8 PCIe slot, but each one of these cards are two they call it like a dual width. So they take up 2 slot widthwise. So you could actually fit in 4 of these AIC card. If you wanted higher capacity like that 8 terabyte, there are 4U systems that can support 8 of these large AIC expansion card using the PCIe slots that people can use with the GPU as well. So there's quite a range of servers, both from Supermicro and Lenovo, that can support this kind of expansion. Just a more view of architecturally, when you expand these memory, this is what they will look like architecturally. So you have dual CPUs here that's connected over UPI in case of Intel, and Infinity Fabric in case of AMD. Each CPU have its own kind of socket memory. That's one UMA node, and then it's connected over PCIe to these AIC card. Physically, of course, the link is CXL over PCIe, and then each one of these AIC card is its own UMA node. Likewise for this first CPU as well as for the second CPU. Now with this kind of now we have expanded the capacity without breaking the budget. There are some trade-offs and potential application performance challenge. And then this is because of this memory hierarchy now that's all these NUMA nodes introduces a more complex heterogeneous memory hierarchy. Here's a table showing if you're assuming a process that's running on NUMA 0, the CPU 0, this is what you see. You essentially see 6 NUMA nodes, and each one of these NUMA nodes have its own capacity, latency, and bandwidth characteristics. So the application performance could be impacted due to the cross-NUMA memory access. So for instance, if your process is running on the first CPU, and then for whatever reason, your page, especially a frequently accessed hot page, is allocated on NUMA 5, what you see is number one is that the latency will be higher. So CXL is much faster than PCIe itself, but still is about 100 nanosecond of extra latency, similar to your previous cross kind of a CPU socket kind of latency. So you would see a longer latency on the access. And then the other effect is that there are different bandwidth limit. So for instance, again, on this from NUMA 0 to NUMA 5, what you may see is bandwidth bottleneck between these two CPUs, because there could be traffic across these CPUs, as well as the bandwidth is shared between all these 3 NUMA nodes. So the issue is that if you saturate this bandwidth, then the latency gets significantly higher. This is actually this is from a measured data set that we have, is that normally the latency is, as advertised, the 100 to 200 nanosecond extra. But as soon as you get close to the bandwidth limit, when you saturate the bandwidth, then latency goes up exponentially to, it could be, 1,000 nanosecond or even more. And then that could lead to problems, not just in terms of performance, but also like kind of a machine check if the latency gets too long. So these are the trade-offs. And this is where we come in. Our memory machine X, I would say middleware, runs in the background, transparent to the application. And what we do is that we continuously monitor the application's memory access pattern, and we optimize where these pages are being allocated relative to where the process is running. So we would continuously optimize all these memory placement such that to minimize the cross-pneumo traffic, particularly the frequently accessed hot pages. Here is just to show an example of MySQL and TPCC benchmark. I have two figures here. One is for the transactions per second, and the other one is for the P95 latency. So these bars are color-coded. The red is kind of like the baseline with 64 gigabyte of memory, and then the rest, is I/O, right? Like you have the local SSD. When we expand that 64 gigabyte memory with another 64 gigabyte of CXL memory, we see a significant jump in terms of transactions per second already. Now, if we add memory machine to the mix, we see another jump in terms of transaction per second. And then just for the reference, we compared it with the full 128 gigabyte on the socket, right? So there's no NUMA hop. So this is kind of a transaction per second. You see benefit from CXL memory expansion, benefit of memory machine, our software to optimize all these memory placement for transactions, for throughput, and then this is for the P95 latency as well. And I'll have so the last slide here is now if we're looking for trial proof of concept users, and then like we have partners. Some of them you met previously in this in these sessions. We have partners as Teralab. Oh, by the way, I should say our software is released, and then we have partners in this ecosystem that provides these AIC card. So Astera Lab has this A1000 card that's available now. You can see this is actual card. It has four DDR5 DIMMs. It's a full height, full length, double width, just like a GPU card. And then it's about 75 watt. Smart Modular, they have a smaller card. They have this single width, full height, half length card that takes 4 DIMMs, and then it's here. And this is very versatile. It practically can go into any servers. And then again, they have this large 8 DIMMs expansion card, along with other vendor who have a DDR4 based expansion card as well. So here's kind of like the availability in terms of engineering samples for POC, as well as like a production customer samples. Let's see. And here is so I think that's pretty much my presentation. Feel free to reach out to me, Yong.Tian at MemVerge.com for any questions or feedback. I love to hear both, and then some links to our content. So please connect with us on the website, YouTube, LinkedIn, Slide, and Discord. So that's pretty much my presentation. Thank you very much for joining. Any questions?